Coming off a great weekend series, just played Minnesota over at Ritter Arena, and what we think was a really great weekend for us. Obviously, the score is not always indicative of how you feel like the overall performance was, but certainly climbing back from a 3-0 deficit in the first game, tightening the gap that way, and then having a great second performance, 1-goal deficit going into the third period. We were happy with that, but definitely looking forward to what's on the horizon with number 1 in the country coming over here to St. Thomas Academy with Wisconsin. We know that, again, another familiar opponent, another top team not only in our league but in the entire country, and preparing well for them.
Coach, you mentioned 2 one-goal games with Minnesota. You were down 3-0, came back, scored 2 goals in the third in game 1, and then had them 2-1 in game 2 entering the third period. What are some of your big takeaways from that Minnesota series, and then how do you sort of carry that momentum over into this weekend series against Wisconsin?
Yeah, you said it perfectly well. A lot to be celebrated from the last weekend. I think it's really tough for our players at times, but I think they've got a great mentality with it. But from an outside perception, you look at the final score and ultimately you see that you didn't end up winning. But when we look back at those games, like you mentioned, if you had told us going into the weekend, hey, you're going to have a 1-goal deficit one way or the other, you're going to be up by a goal or down by a goal with less than a minute left against one of the top teams in the country with Minnesota, we would say, we'll take that every time. That's a really great game by anyone's standard, regardless of how you get there, right? And then, as you mentioned too, all of a sudden we go down 2 quick ones in that second game, and we make an immediate pushback on our power play. Finally got a big goal there with Nicole Valario scoring 1, and then killed off a 5-minute penalty kill against some of the best players in the entire world. So a lot to be celebrated for sure, and certainly things that we've been showing as a program that as we continue to make those tweaks, those adjustments, now it's the difference of 1 goal or 2 goals and really kind of taking that momentum swing and winning some of those games.
Yeah, looking ahead to your next, 5 weeks here, you've got number 1 in the country, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 10. How do you, maybe as a coach, but then, personally, but then also how do you prepare your players for that, both physically of coming off of those, back to back, but physically, but then mentally as well, when you've got such high-level talent on the ice on both sides?
Yeah, it's a great question. We just actually had a staff meeting and we were talking about that as a full group, is how do we support our student athletes through a 5-week stretch that you're playing 1 through 4 and then number 10 as well. I think part of that preparation is kind of built in organically, because when you play number 3 weekend 1 and then you face number 1 the following weekend, and then you're facing number 3 the following, one weekend prepares you for the next in some ways. I think that we continue to try to take a balanced approach where we are tailoring everything that we're doing to each individual opponent that we have, while saying, what is St. Thomas hockey and how do we pride ourselves on how we play, and how we're going to counter some of those top opponents. So as you mentioned, when you look at those 4 or 5 weekends ahead of us, I was telling our staff this morning, I think that without a doubt, we have the toughest 5-weekend stretch of any women's hockey program in the country, if not maybe any program in athletics in the country, as you look at those statistically speaking. So a lot of it is in not only preparing weekend to weekend, tailoring against our opponent, but how are we resetting, how are we staying fresh mentally off the ice, how are we connecting with one another, supporting each other, and really making sure that that student athlete experience is first. Because I think that when you do all that work outside of the rink, that's when you can show up and play together in spaces that you can really prove that you got something special.
You guys have traditionally played Wisconsin pretty well. I think last year you guys even had a lead against Wisconsin early, and then it was a close game. What are you expecting is going to happen in Mendota Heights this upcoming weekend against the Badgers? Yeah,
for whatever reason, I do feel like our program loves playing Wisconsin. I think that they play a really solid game. They're very structured, they're very fast, a lot of playmaking. And I think as an athlete, a lot of times it's fun to play opponents like that, because if you can meet that with the same level of, passion, energy in your systems and your structure, it makes for a really fun game. So I do think our players enjoy playing Wisconsin. I think that they definitely love playing at home. We seem to play well at home. And so I don't know what exactly you can equate that to. But I think, like I said, it's that fast-paced game. It's really competitive, and we shared some statistics with them actually in the first series against them. We did some calculations, and I think it was a 0.0000, so 4 zeros, and then 1% chance that you would get the opportunity to play kind of on that stage when we played Wisconsin. Just being that #1 team in the country, playing in the WCHA, the opportunity to even play Division I hockey in the first place, how many players get that chance? And when you look at it statistically, to be in that circumstance exactly, it is a fraction of a percent. So I think having that level of gratitude for our athletes, that's something that they're really great about and they really appreciate, is the opportunity to show up. And even though we have a league that's as strong as ours, look at it as an opportunity to be really grateful for, to say how many student athletes get this chance, not very many, a fraction of a percent, and to really play with that level of appreciation is something they do every single day.